Go, Christina. You go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Christina. I'm with the Solomon delegation. This is the first time there's a youth representative from Solomon Islands here in Copenhagen, and I'm really honored and privileged to be here. My sponsors are Get Up, and I'm with the PSB team, and I'm here mainly to put the voice of Pacific Islanders out there, and to get our stories from our homes, our islands here. We want the negotiators to listen to us and know that there are Pacific Islanders out there who need your help, who need you to join hands together in order to come up with the agreement that we all deserve.
Hi, my name's Shabazz and I'm with Christina here, and PSP is Project Survival Pacific. So I was born in Fiji and I now live in Australia, and we understand how important climate change is to small island states like Fiji, because there's 8 million people there, and if we do nothing about climate change, 4 million of them will be displaced by 2020. And that's sad, because the islands are not just about their homes or infrastructure, but the islands from their culture, their roots and the heritage of these people, and of the people back home in Fiji. And we need to do something ambitious, something that really tackles climate change. And what we want to do here is to let people like Christina's voice, young people from the Pacific who don't get an opportunity, have their voice heard, but also for world leaders to listen to this voice and to listen to the science and get away from this 450 parts per million 2 degrees sea level rise, because that's not survival for the Pacific. That's going to be absolutely horrible. We need to get them to listen to the 350 parts per million message, and get them to be more ambitious in Copenhagen.
Are you hoping for 1 degree to 1.5?
Look, we're with 1.5. 1.5, and that's exactly what we need, because that's what the Alliance of Small Island Nations is telling us. That's what the Pacific Islanders are telling us. That's what their governments are telling us. And we just need Annex 1 countries, but also some of the developed countries such as India and China, to start listening to the message, because without India, China and some of the other bigger developed nations, we won't get to 1.5, and that's just not good enough for the Pacific.
Are you disappointed that you keep hearing 2 degrees? People keep referring to 2 degrees as the safe limit, and that how do you feel about that, considering what's happening already at under 1?
I think it's disappointing, and frankly, it's not good enough. If you want to talk about in reality of negotiations, we're not even at 450 parts per million. We're still quibbling over that. And so what we need to do is we need the developed nations to be more ambitious and lay down their targets so that they can get to 1.5, so that the developing nations can follow them, and not sort of play this chicken and the egg game of, developed nations will only move when developing nations move, and developing nations will move only when developed nations will move. We need to move together, and we just have to sit there and agree to 1.5.
What are you hoping for by 2020 in emission cuts, and when are you hoping to peak?
Look, that's a very good question, and that's a question for developing nations. But I think by 2020, if we can get somewhere into the range of 40% target cuts, which is what the science is calling for, to stabilise at, I think, 350, that's a good outcome. And I think if India and China and some of the bigger developing emitters who are moving towards a developed nation status can perhaps pick a peak year around 2020, and also then start cutting from business to usual, that would be, I think, a positive outcome, and would probably allow us to reach 1.5, which is the goal of small island states.
I spoke to Tyndall Climate Change Institute in the building yesterday, and they're saying 50% by 2020.
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's 40%, 50%, which is the band of what the science is telling us. And I think the best way to characterise this is a quote from David Suzuki, the environmentalist, who said that really the developed world and the developing world, the nations are playing Russian roulette with our futures, because it's about survival, and we just want them to listen and realise, get the negotiations to that point.
Well, we're hoping that we could peak now. I mean, we've already dropped emissions this year, so why go back up?
Yeah, exactly. Look, but I think it's going to be really hard in terms of being a realist. It's going to be hard for developing nations to set peak years now, and I think we need to give them some time, but not too much time. And I think at this negotiations, they really have to put on the table peak years, so that we know what their commitments are actually going to be, and so we know what we're talking about. And without a peak year, their commitments could come out to nothing.
One last question for you. What do you think of the whole perception that people that talk about the reality, what we have to do, in order to save human civilization? are not in political reality. You know, the political reality
Look,
doesn't let us survive. So what do you think about that?
yeah, I think you're talking about the political pressures back home, the domestic political scene that guides governments. I think governments around the world have failed in setting, and leaders around the world have failed in setting the government domestic scene. I come from Australia, and in Australia, our debate at the moment in terms of the public forum is whether we believe in the climate science or we don't. Whether we listen to 99% of the world's scientists to what the IPCC is saying, and we come to Europe and the debate's about what you do. So we're talking about what actions to take, and that's, I think, a paradox, and it's really funny. And I think what we need to, the governments here and world leaders have to move their own domestic debates to talking about adaptation and mitigation and what you do physically to get there and the type of measures you take. And once we get the debate there, then I think we can then start moving to a 450, sorry, it's not 450, move away from 450 towards a 350, 1.5 target. And before I came, I was looking at a survey that was recently done in China, and I don't know who can go through the survey, but the people of China, one of the main concerns for the future is climate change. So these big countries who come here, who developing countries who don't want to put targets on the table, who try and say that in some way we're trying to stop them from growing, which is what we're not doing. We're saying grow in a sustainable way that will protect all of our futures. Their own people are saying to them they're concerned about climate change, and I think it's a domestic reality as well as an international reality.